Hello and welcome to Hooked. My name is Nir Eyal, and in this online course, I will be sharing with you techniques for building habit forming technologies. In this first session, we'll dive right in by exploring the world of habit forming technology and what habit forming technology can help our users do and why it's good for our business. So one thing we know about the products and services that we use, and particularly the technologies we use, is that technologies are able to profoundly change our behavior. And when I work with companies, be them in my consulting practice or companies I might meet when I'm out speaking and working with different folks, I often hear them comparing themselves to these best of breed companies, the companies that we're all familiar with that have profoundly changed our day to day lives and our routines and habits. Now, these companies tend to have a common pattern. They all seem to start as toys, as features of perhaps a different product, and they're universally underestimated. And some companies that may come to mind that may meet this definition are companies like Facebook or Pinterest or Instagram or Snapchat. These companies that have profoundly impacted our lives and in the blink of an eye are attracting hundreds of millions of users and many of them making hundreds of millions, if not billions, of dollars. So these companies are what we'll be studying, these companies that profoundly change our habits and our day to day behaviors. What I've done over the past several years is to look for patterns, to look for what is it about these products that can fundamentally change our behaviors and what's common to those products. What do we see time and time again? And I started out in my exploration of habit forming technologies by asking a question that I was asked time and time again when I was running my last company. Is your product a vitamin or a painkiller? And this is a great question that investors, whether it's investors in the external sense, for example, an outside investor like a venture capitalist perhaps might ask you, or even if you're working inside a larger organization, people within your company might ask you if your idea is a vitamin or painkiller, because people want to invest in painkillers. Painkillers address a burning need, right? They stop the user's pain. They have quantifiable markets. They address a clear need. And investors want to hear that your product is addressing a painkiller. As opposed to a vitamin, a vitamin is a nice to have. We don't really know if that vitamin we take every morning is actually doing its job, but it feels good knowing that we're doing something for our health. So here's the question I started with, and I'm a little confused here, and maybe perhaps you are too, whether the products that we identified earlier that fundamentally change user habits are in fact vitamins or painkillers. The Pinterest and Twitters and Instagrams and Facebooks, these products, what are they? Think for a minute in your mind what you would classify these products as. Are they vitamins or are they painkillers? Well, before you make up your mind, let me posit this thought that a habit is when not doing something causes you a bit of pain. A habit is when not doing something causes you a bit of pain. Because what we find is endemic to habit forming technologies is that they start as pleasure seeking behaviors. They start as things we want to do. And then they become pain alleviators over time. Through successive use, they form habits and they create pain alleviating behaviors. We use these products out of habit, out of compulsion. Now, let's be very clear about what I mean by pain. We're not causing our users pain, in fact, quite the opposite. What I'd like to demonstrate for you is what kind of pain I'm referring to exactly. What I'd like you to do for a moment is to close your eyes. Yeah, right there at your screen. Go ahead and close your eyes and indulge me in a little mind experiment here. What I want you to do is to think for a moment with your eyes closed about a message that you have just received. In whatever medium it is, that important people use to reach you. Now, maybe it's an email, maybe it's an SMS, maybe it's a Facebook message, whatever medium it is that you use when someone important in your life needs to reach you. Now, I want you to bring awareness to your body right now. How are you feeling? What does your gut feel like? I want you to bring awareness to that feeling, and now open your eyes. And ask yourself for a minute, how did you feel? Now, I've done this presentation for crowds of hundreds of people, and across the board, the number one response that I get from this exercise is someone saying anxious. Anxiety is probably the most common response. I also hear some people saying stressed. I hear some people saying, like, I want to check it. There's all kinds of different responses, but what you likely felt is what I call the itch. It's a physiological response to a psychological stimulus. There was no message, of course. I just made it up. And yet, what you likely experienced was your body physically changing in response to that stimulus. That's the itch. What you likely felt was a response similar to what a group of women felt when they observed chocolate in an experiment conducted back in 2005. In this experiment, women who were self-described chocolate cravers were shown images of delicious chocolate. What's interesting about this study is that the women ascribed the positive feelings they had to the chocolate itself. And yet, these women who were self-described chocolate cravers, remember, they were people who said that they loved chocolate and they craved chocolate quite a bit, also ascribed some unusual aspects to their encounter with images of chocolate. They described stress. They described a loss of control. They described a very similar feeling as to that itch, this wanting reflex. But they described that response to themselves, even though the object, the chocolate, had triggered both the pleasure and the stress responses. Because what we find time and time again when it comes to the products that we use every day is that they're built through associations. Our brain is looking for solutions to whatever problems it encounters. And when we feel that itch I described earlier, or that sensation that the chocolate craving women felt, our brain looks for reliable solutions. So our users, when they're using different technologies, they come seeking pleasure. They come seeking a reward, for example. But that product soon becomes an important part of their life with repetitive use. Why? Because when they feel that itch, they seek to scratch it. And so how we respond to our itch, how we respond to that pain response of needing something, determines our habits. And these aren't just technology habits. All the habits we have in our day-to-day lives, how we learn new behaviors, is by responding to these cues. We seek a solution to our discomfort found in the product's use. So one thing that's important to note about how we form new behaviors is that we know that stress is a precondition for addiction. And habits are very close to addictions. And so I want to spend just a little time talking about what exactly is this stress response that we find is a precondition for addictions. In a study conducted back in 2007, researchers found that when they gave mice a CRF antagonist, which is a substance that blocks the stress response, they could not turn these lab mice into alcoholic mice, into mice that were dependent on this chemical alcohol. They reversed the experiment. They tried to do the opposite, where they took mice who had previously been addicted to alcohol, and when they tried to reverse the experiment by giving them a CRF antagonist, they found that they lost almost immediately their alcohol dependency. So what this study showed is that the stress response, that itch we described earlier, is in fact a precondition for addiction. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves in terms of the addiction, of what addiction is, let me just say that what this course is not about is addiction. We do not want to create addictions in our users. That's because addictions are a persistent compulsion or dependency on a behavior or substance. And addictions are always bad. Okay? By definitions, addictions are self-defeating behaviors. Now, why do I bring up addictions? That's clearly not what we want to do with our products. We don't want to harm people, obviously. I bring up addictions because it turns out that the same processes that form addictions also help us learn how to create something that can be used for good or evil, for good purposes or bad purposes, and that is habit. A habit is simply a behavior done with little or no conscious thought. Behavior done with little or no conscious thought. And as I mentioned, habits can be good or bad, right? We have good habits and we have bad habits. And so the purpose of why I'm teaching this course is that I believe that we are entering an age where habits can be used for good. There's an explosion of companies and innovations coming out which are dependent upon helping people live healthier, happier, more connected, richer lives by creating healthy habits. And so that's what this course is going to be about. I'm going to help you learn how to create those healthy habits in your users. So if you have a product that requires user engagement, that requires users interacting with your product regularly and habitually, this course is for you. In the next section, we're going to go further into depth onto how to actually create those habits.